Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Omelian joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops.
We believe that the world should be ruled by democracies.
I was interviewing you on television a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
And you said, if you really want to understand Jerusalem, why don't you come here and see it?
And you came.
Here I am. Mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. Why this cannot be fixed?
There are 425 million guns in the United States, which is more than the population.
The problem here is Trump has been able to make the argument that this is a political prosecution and that he's being singled out unfairly.
Defend our nation.
You are saying we could have a cure for cancer.
We'll have treatments for many cancers in this decade, and they're going to come from India.
Downside is that it could potentially wipe us out. But let's start with the upside first.
The upsides are absolutely enormous. The potential uses of this are almost unlimited.
I only discovered AutoGPTs about a week ago and started writing about them. And after I started writing about them, Jeff Bezos followed me on Twitter, and all kinds of crazy amounts of people have been contacting us.
The show where we get you the week's biggest stories.
You're watching Gravitas. I'm Priyanka Sharma, and here is our lineup for tonight. In 2013, one man began an ambitious project. He saw it as a road to unending riches, to expand his power, his influence. But his intentions were not noble. I'm talking about Xi Jinping and his superhighway to world domination, the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. 10 years later, this dream is about to crash and burn. The BRI is not an ambitious project anymore, it is a death trap. It is not a superhighway anymore, but a slimy path riddled with potholes and roadblocks. So tonight on Gravitas, I will tell you why Xi Jinping's brainchild is now failing. Italy has said goodbye to the project. Italy has dumped the BRI. This Brexit may convince other nations to follow suit, rightfully so. It's high time we say no to China's death trap diplomacy, and that will be our top story tonight. Also on the show, the G20 is a day away and the British Prime Minister is making some tall claims. He says he will rein in Khalistani terrorism. How convenient of him to make this statement right before he lands in India. On the show, I'll tell you the reality. In Japan, artificial intelligence is being used to spot sleepy students. Would you be okay if technology was being used to spy on your child? At what point do we draw the line between innovation and surveillance? China is at it again, trying to crush freedom of expression. This time, the Chinese regime has a problem with what people wear. How far will China go to control its people? Stay with me, we'll discuss. It's confirmed. Italy, the G7 member to join China's Belt and Road, is dumping China's biggest international project. Why? For the same reason that poorer nations have discovered. It's a setup. It's a cheat. It also seems to be the start of the end of the road for China's road to destruction. Most importantly, it is the ultimate humiliation for Chinese President Xi Jinping. BRI was his dream project, the highway to Chinese supremacy. And now it is staring at a dead end. Italy says the BRI has not produced the results we were hoping for. Poor Italy. It was wrong in hoping for results in the first place. Rome should have known better. Why do I say that? Because the BRI is paved with no good intention whatsoever. Its sole purpose is to expand China's influence through a debt trap, through coercion, forced cooperation, especially where vulnerable countries are concerned. BRI is all about weaponization of the global supply chain. It still evades me how countries were even sold by BRI's misleading roadmap. Better late than ever, there is finally a turn in the road. Italy is gifting China a Brexit on the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road. Reports say the formal announcement is expected next month. This will be during Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's state visit to China. It will be interesting to see Rome's choice of words when it makes the breakup public. But for now, the Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani says that Italy would prioritize a strategic partnership over a single deal. I'm quoting now, a strategic partnership involves all sectors, so it is more important than single bilateral agreements such as the Silk Road or Belt and Road, which so far is unsatisfactory in terms of exports and investment. That's what Italy is saying. These are Tajani's words. There is no point sugarcoating this humiliating breakup. Now, we all remember the sensational words that Italy's defense minister, Guido Crosetto, had used when talking about the BRI back in July. He called the BRI wicked. Let's go down that road for the sake of our amusement. Here's the quote. The choice to join the Silk Road was an improvised and wicked act made by the government of Giuseppe Conte, which led to a double negative result. A double negative result. We have exported a load of oranges to China. They have tripled their exports to Italy in 3 years. The most ridiculous thing then was that Paris, without signing any treaties in those days, sold planes to Beijing for tens of billions. The issue today is how to walk back from the BRI. Well, the deed is done. Italy has dumped the dragon, and the Brexit could not have been better timed. Xi Jinping's BRI has hit a roadblock at a time when China is coaxing G20 Sherpas to have one belt, one road mentioned in the G20 communique. Why? Because like I told you yesterday, China claims one belt, one road is what inspired this year's G20 theme, that is one earth, one family, one future. And hence it should be a part of the joint communication. Well, Italy's Brexit has dug potholes in China's my way or the highway attitude. It has reduced China's BRI pitch to a laughingstock. And it is Xi Jinping who has become the butt of the joke. Chinese propaganda machinery has sprung into action to soften the blow. An alternate reality is now being drawn. Leading this campaign is the most obvious suspect, Global Times. Look at this. With Europe in the shadow of economic recession and geopolitical conflict, it would be wise for the European country to stabilize practical cooperation with China, a large and growing economy. Given the year 2023 marks the BRI's 10th anniversary, if Italy decides to pull out at this point, it means that Rome is shutting itself out of the new favorable policies that are expected. Time for facts now. Italy signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative back in 2019. It became the first G7 country to do so. But earlier this week, Italy's former Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte said that he thought BRI was quote-unquote meant to rebalance our trade balance. Except BRI was China's attempt to redraft the rules of international trade and skew it, of course, in China's favor. Basically, Italy believed in China's promise of a symbiosis. Under the BRI, China plans to construct what it likes to call the Overland Silk Road Economic Belt and the Maritime Silk Road. Initially, the two were referred to as One Belt, One Road, and now it's just called the BRI. Xi Jinping insists the mega project will integrate more countries and regions into economic globalization. And Italy fell for his lie. But Rome has finally woken up 4 years later. For Italy, dumping the BRI is a road to recovery. And I have to say this, it's high time that other remaining BRI countries also do as the Romans do, and realize that China is a road hog and the BRI is a road to nowhere. In the last 10 years, at least 148 countries have joined the BRI or have shown interest in BRI projects. 44 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, 35 in Europe and Central Asia, 25 in East Asia and the Pacific, 21 in Latin America and the Caribbean, 18 in West Asia and North Africa, and 6 countries in Southeast Asia. It's a different story that China has not yet given a clear definition of what a BRI project is. Does BRI encompass everything that China does abroad, including local projects financed by Chinese banks? We don't know. Does BRI also include projects that have laborers given by Chinese contractors? It's hard to say. China's vagueness has left enough room for abuse while also creating the perfect breeding ground for Ponzi schemes and scammers. They are just looking to lay traps. Here's an example. This is a one belt, one road camel milk. It was produced with German technology in Kazakhstan, but what does that mean? Ask the Chinese. In 2019, a Chinese state-owned minerals giant, Extremism mining group, erected a billboard in Kyrgyzstan. This on the highway from Bishkek to Lake Izkyul. The sign said it was part of the Belt and Road Initiative, and the billboard was gone in a few months. And Extremism's website was scrubbed off BRI keywords. You see, in India, we say made in China is equal to questionable. Now you know why. The BRI is no different. Under the guise of BRI, Chinese companies have gone on a spending spree, funding the expansion of China's global footprint, strengthening Beijing's wolf warrior diplomacy. But to what end? And to whose benefit? Not yours for sure. It is September 2023. The G20 summit in New Delhi is just a day away as countries come together to lay the road for the future. China is missing from the picture. Countries are closing the door on Beijing, resetting their roadmap for the future. Economies are looking at an alternate road to sustainable and peaceful economic growth. India presented one such roadmap at the ASEAN summit in Jakarta. It is a 12-point proposal for strengthening cooperation between New Delhi and ASEAN. The plan includes multimodal connectivity, an economic corridor linking Southeast Asia, West Asia and Europe, also an ASEAN-India fund for a digital future. This is a turning point China will want to remember. Within 10 years of the launch, Xi's Silk Road has hit a rough patch. Xi Jinping's dreams are coming crumbling down, bringing down with it China's dreams of global domination. Let's move on. Is NATO provoking a nuclear war? A nuclear saber-rattling contest is now unfolding, and this time the culprit is not Russia, it's NATO. Yes, the US-led North Atlantic Treaty Organization is sending shivers through the world. After supplying cluster bombs to Ukraine, the US is now arming Ukraine with another highly controversial weapon: depleted uranium munitions. The US is about to dispatch 120 mm uranium tank rounds to the war-torn country. It will become only the second country after the United Kingdom to greenlight the shipment of this incendiary weapon. Russia is fuming. Moscow has deemed it nothing short of criminal. So let's first dive into what this controversial weapon really is and why is it stoking the fires of conflict in this 19th-month-long war. The depleted uranium anti-tank rounds are meant for American Abrams tanks. It is part of a new multi-million-dollar arms donation by the US to Ukraine. It is supposed to help Kyiv push through Russian lines in its grueling counteroffensive. The armor-piercing rounds were first developed by the US during the Cold War. It was designed to destroy Soviet tanks, including the T-72 tanks that Ukraine is now battling on the field. The rounds are made of depleted uranium. What is depleted uranium, you might ask? It is a byproduct of the process to create a rarer enriched uranium that is used in nuclear fuel. Although far less powerful than enriched uranium and incapable of generating a nuclear reaction, it is still extremely dense, more than lead, and this makes it highly attractive as a projectile. It is so dense and it has so much momentum that it just keeps going through the armor. And then it heats up. It heats up so much that it catches fire. In the 1970s, the US Army began making armor-piercing rounds with depleted uranium. They have since added it to composite tank armor to strengthen it. It has also added the depleted uranium to munitions fired by Air Force's A-10 Thunderbolt II, also known as Tank Killer. Now, US officials say that these munitions are very common and that they do not present a radioactive threat. They cite studies by the International Atomic Energy Agency showing the existence of depleted uranium residues, and these were dispersed in the environment. But they say that these do not pose a radiological hazard to people. But what does the International Atomic Energy Agency say? It is considered considerably less radioactive than natural uranium. When Britain decided to send them to Ukraine earlier this year, Russian President Putin accused it of sending weapons with a nuclear component. And to this, the UK's Defence Ministry had hit back, saying that the depleted uranium shells have been used for decades. The UK accused Moscow of spreading misinformation. But in the wake of the British move in March, Putin warned that Moscow would respond accordingly. And he did. He placed tactical nuclear weapons right on Ukraine's doorstep. In Russia-friendly Belarus by May, for the first time since the 1991 fall of the Soviet Union, Russia had placed its nukes outside its borders. So even though the West downplays the nuclear provocation bid during war, can these provocations stop Russia from escalating the war on ground? Still, despite the war of words, the nuclear provocations, and while the entire world watches nervously, US officials have decided to send uranium weapons to Ukraine, calling it the most effective way of arming Abrams tanks. Now, we must not forget, this US decision is a U-turn. Back in March, the Pentagon said that it would not send depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine. Clearly, it did not follow its own words. It is sending the weapons because they are the best way to arm Abrams tanks. The US hopes the new tanks can assist Ukraine in its counteroffensive. So what was the Kremlin's reaction to this announcement? Well, this time Russia denounced the move as bad news. The Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov called Washington's decision a criminal act. He said, and I quote, "This does not simply qualify as a step towards escalation, but reflects the shocking disregard for environmental consequences of the use of such weapons in the combat zone on the part of Washington." He adds, this in fact qualifies as a crime. Ryabkov further alleged that while Russia continues to hold contact on humanitarian issues with the US, Washington does not work with Russia on major issues. Meanwhile, Russia's embassy in London accused the US and allies of wanting to turn Ukraine into a radioactive landfill. Now, it is important to note here that while countries at the forefront of deploying such munitions, like the United Kingdom, France and the US, have consistently maintained that there is no direct link between depleted uranium exposure and health, a different story unfolds on the ground. And here is where it gets disconcerting. Opponents say that uranium weapons are dangerous. They pose risks to public health, risks like cancer, birth defects. They are a risk if you touch or ingest depleted uranium dust. In cities like Fallujah and Basra in Iraq, as well as sites in Serbia, Kosovo, and Montenegro, once part of Yugoslavia, there have been a rise in cancer-related diseases, as well as birth deformities, in the decades following the use of depleted uranium munitions. But the problem is, many don't see the correlation or have yet to be shown the same. But the evidence seems compelling despite official denial. Not just that, soldiers who have valiantly served in these war zones later suffered from the Gulf War syndrome or Balkan syndrome. In the early 2000s, this had raised concerns about the depleted uranium's potential health concerns. Now, amid all the concerns and political war of words, there is another concern. And that is the world's food crisis. Ukraine, which will now become the next site for the use of uranium rounds, is also a major global exporter of grain, of sunflower, maize, wheat and barley. So once the war escalates, the radioactivity of the weapons' dust particles will stay on for decades, if not a century. Yet, even in light of these alarming realities, Western powers persist in escalating nuclear tensions. A bleak reminder of the tremendous cost of war. And it leads us to question, is this the kind of reassurance that Ukraine needs for a lasting peace deal? Something to think about. Is the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, trying to appease India? Why do I say that? Tomorrow he will be in New Delhi for the G20 summit, and just on the eve of his visit, he decided to address the Khalistan issue. In an email sent to the Press Trust of India, the British Prime Minister tried to reassure India over pro-Khalistan violence in the UK. Let me read out what he said. No form of extremism is acceptable in the UK, and I take the duty of the government to disrupt and counter violent, divisive ideologies, whatever they may be, very seriously. We are working closely with our partners in the Indian government to tackle the threat from pro-Khalistan extremism, and the British police are fully empowered to deal with violent acts. Well, we certainly appreciate the reassurance, but can we talk about the UK's actions? What has the UK done so far against the said extremism? How many pro-Khalistanis has it arrested? Is Sunak simply playing nice because he's headed to India? What is the point of this statement right before his visit? It is nothing but appeasement. In August, UK Security Minister Tom Tugendhat was in India for the G20 anti-corruption ministerial meeting. There he announced new funding to tackle Khalistani extremism in the UK. How much? $120,000. These funds were supposed to help the India-UK Joint Extremism Task Force. But can we ignore that they came in a lead-up to the G20 summit? This year itself, there have been multiple pro-Khalistani incidents in the UK, but the country has not really done anything about them. Not until it was asked to, at least. Take the case of the Khalsa Television Limited. The media channel catered to the Sikh diaspora in the UK. It was established back in 2015, and since then, it was actively pushing Khalistani propaganda. Last year, one of its programs called on the UK-based Sikhs to travel to Punjab and engage in violent crime and disorder. Why? To achieve a separate Khalistan state, said the presenter. Yes, you heard it right. The channel was openly calling for violence in India. So what did the UK do about it then? It suspended the channel's license with immediate effect. But guess what? Former Prime Minister Liz Truss was again in New Delhi at that time, and for 7 long years, there was no action against this Khalsa TV. But as soon as Truss landed in India, the channel was dissolved. Coincidence? It's almost like whenever a British diplomat has an Indian visit planned, they start making promises to rein in extremism. But once they are back home, they forget all about it. Do you remember the March incident? On March 19, several Khalistani separatists gathered in front of the Indian High Commission in the UK. They waved their flags and called for Khalistani supporter Amritpal Singh to be freed. One of them pulled down the Indian tricolour at the High Commission. Yes, India's flag was taken down in the UK. Where was the security? Where were British officials then when all this was happening? What explains the indifference? Why bother flying a country's flag when you cannot honour it? Naturally, anger poured out in India. Indians demanded immediate action from the UK. The Ministry of External Affairs lodged a formal protest. It also summoned the highest-level UK diplomat in India. Soon, members of India's Sikh community gathered outside the British High Commission in New Delhi. Security barricades were removed from outside the British High Commission. And after all of this, did the UK do anything? Did it track down the separatists? Last we checked, it was probing the matter. It says it is looking for evidence. What kind of evidence do you need? The faces are out there. The footage of the incident was everywhere on social media. Almost 6 months have passed. So what explains the delay? Many more incidents of Khalistani violence and vandalism have happened since then, and the UK has done next to nothing. Rishi Sunak says the UK doesn't tolerate extremism, but seeing the track record, it seems it has been conveniently ignoring it. Sunak's remarks are too little too late, and they look like a desperate PR move and nothing else. They say there's no place like home. It rings true for non-resident Indians as well. A lot of Indians settle abroad. Better living standards, high-paying jobs attract them. But once they have saved enough, many want to return to their homeland after retirement. Look at this survey now by a fintech platform. It shows at least 60% of the non-resident Indians living in the US, Canada, the UK, Australia and Singapore want to come back to India to spend their golden years. Let's take a look at some more figures. 80% of NRIs based in Australia plan to return to India after retiring. We have the same figure for Singapore. From the United States, 75% of NRIs want to come back. From the UK, the figure stands at 70%. From Canada, it's 63%. So why do so many Indians want to come back home? It's as much for financial as for emotional reasons. You see, India is formulating a strong strategy to stabilize its economy. It has become an emerging global startup hub to reckon with. There are stellar manufacturing capabilities, financial services and technology advancements. Simply put, there are promising investment opportunities for NRIs who have earned in dollars. Investment in India can bring huge profits. In fact, a whopping 72% of NRIs believe that India has a stable investment avenue. They are bullish on India's growth. 56% of the NRIs based in the US and 44% of those in Canada have already started investing in India for retirement. Then, of course, there is low cost of living. NRIs who have earned in dollars all their life and have thousands saved up in their retirement funds can afford a better life in India. Much better. In fact, far better than they would have in the United States or even the United Kingdom. Why do I say that? Because inflation is already soaring in the West. People are struggling to make ends meet. After retirement, when there are no monthly paychecks and only bills to pay, NRIs would be financially better off in India. There is also better and more accessible healthcare. In America, the average wait time for emergency room is 145 minutes. In the UK, it's 70 minutes. In fact, last year, nearly 40% of NHS hospital departments in England had an average treatment waiting time of more than 18 weeks. For some, it was well over 30 weeks. In India, the waiting period lies between 15 and 20 minutes. So where would you want to live? Especially at an age when you'd be more vulnerable and would need more medical attention. Of course, at a place where you have better access to medical care. Not somewhere that you'd have to wait for weeks to see a doctor's face. Then there is the emotional factor. Indians go abroad and build a new life, but often their families are left behind. And why just families? Also their friends, their culture, their childhood memories. Some want to raise their children or grandchildren in India close to their culture. You see, a lot of Indians move to foreign countries every year. Reports say the figure lies between 1 and 2.5 million. As of data from 2020, 18 million Indians live abroad. India has the largest diaspora population in the world. Because of this trend, with doctors, engineers and tech-savvy individuals moving out, India has grappled with brain drain. But now the good part is, a lot of the NRIs want to come back, even if it's after retirement. Home is, after all, home. Shifting our focus now to China. Can a person's clothes hurt your feelings? Well, in the case of China, they can. The nation is mulling over a draft law. The law bans clothes and speeches which may offend the spirit of the Chinese people. The draft law clearly highlights President Xi's bid to throttle dissent. The law has sparked debate, and people are questioning the legitimacy of the proposal. Is China trying to control what citizens wear? Will people be forced to dress alike? Our next report brings you the details. Take a look.
China has recently released a swath of proposed changes to its public security laws, but the clothing law has drawn immediate reaction from the public. We are talking about a particular draft law. which bans clothes and speech which are detrimental to the spirit of the Chinese people and hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. The draft law has been released by the Standing Committee of the nation's legislature and has been listed among their priorities for this year. Let us remind you, the draft law is serious about the clothes citizens wear. The contentious clauses mention that people who wear or force to wear clothes or symbols that undermine the spirit of the nation will be detained for 15 days and fined up to $680. Citizens who create or distribute articles will face the same punishment. The proposed changes also forbid insulting, slandering, or infringing upon the names of local heroes and martyrs. But what constitutes an offensive outfit? That's the odd part. China has not specified which type of clothes which may defame the nation. Legal experts are calling for more clarity to avoid excessive enforcement. Citizens are confused and angry. Some social media users say that will wearing a suit and tie count? Marxism originated in the West. Could its presence in China also count as hurting national feelings? What if the law enforcer has a personal interpretation of the hurt and initiates moral judgment of others beyond the scope of law? Shouldn't the spirit of the Chinese nation be strong and resilient? Why can it be easily damaged by a costume? Law experts say that the lack of clarity could lead to an infringement of personal rights. Critics say the law's vague phrasing could easily lead to abuse. How would citizens know when the nation's feelings are hurt? China has a reputation of banning clothes it doesn't like. Any outfit that doesn't suit their narrative is cast out, even plain black t-shirts. In 2019, during the pro-democracy riots in Hong Kong, protesters wore black t-shirts, trousers and face masks as a uniform during the rallies. What did China do then? It banned exports of black clothes from the mainland to the financial hub. Beijing even banned black t-shirts, helmets, umbrellas, walkie-talkies, drones, goggles and metal chains. Last year, a kimono-clad woman was detained in the city of Suzhou. Why? She was accused of picking quarrels and provoking trouble because she had worn a Japanese garment. Following the incident, a social media user wrote, "To wear a kimono is to hurt the feelings of the Chinese nation. To eat Japanese food is to jeopardize its spirit. When did the feelings and spirit of the time-tested Chinese nation become so fragile?" Earlier last month, people wearing rainbow print clothes were denied entry to a concert by a Taiwanese singer. The situation is ironic, as the Chinese love to wear luxury clothes. China even has its fast fashion apps like Shein and Temu. Will the array of clothing options be reduced to only a few? Reports say that Chinese fast fashion apps have even outpaced competitors like Zara and H&M in the US market. Chinese fast fashion apps like Cider, Cupshe, Jolly Chick, Shein and Temu. Some of the companies are now being accused of copyright infringement and facing lawsuits for intellectual property rights violations. In the dictatorship of clothing, will citizens be restricted to only one kind of outfit? Would their love for luxury clothes be snatched away? Will China see a new kind of cultural revolution? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
It's a tale of two countries. One, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where women are still treated like second-class citizens. They are denied a very basic human right, the right to their own bodies. Versus another country, which has been bullied and discriminated against by the first country. It is known globally as a third world nation, yet in a landmark move today, it has legally granted women the choice over their own bodies. I'm talking about the United States and Mexico. And while American women's abortion rights are still being challenged, Mexican women are celebrating today as their Supreme Court has decriminalized it. Mexico's Supreme Court has decriminalized abortion nationwide. The landmark judgment legalizes abortion across all 32 states of Mexico. The Mexican Supreme Court said that denial of the possibility of termination violated the human rights of women. The court said on social media that the legal system that penalizes abortion is unconstitutional since it violates the human rights of women and people with the capacity to gestate. The judgment also opens the door for all government healthcare facilities to provide abortions, a move which has been welcomed by women's rights groups. Mexico City was the first of the country's states to decriminalize abortion in 2007. A dozen others followed suit. And here's the irony of the situation. Mexico's ruling goes in the opposite direction to the United States. After the US Supreme Court overturned the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision in 2022, which had ensured the right to abortion, American women now find themselves searching for abortion options, many crossing the border into Mexico to access these services. Can you believe it? In the oldest democracy in the world, the reality is women are struggling to exercise their bodily autonomy. A significant segment of society has been disadvantaged. And where do they turn to for support? To Mexico. According to the Washington Post, Texas has adopted a significant new anti-abortion strategy. Local trafficking laws now criminalize the transportation of anyone seeking an abortion within the city or county limits. The masterminds behind these laws had previously collaborated to introduce Texas's controversial bounty bill. And this demands our close attention. Because a majority of abortion in the US today involve medication. Organizations have begun mailing these medications to patients in states where abortion is a criminal offense. The anti-abortion advocates are constructing a wall, if you will. A wall aimed at obstructing abortion access, effectively confining pregnant women within the boundaries of their conservative states. And what's alarming is that such measures have been enacted in 2 countries and 2 cities. Conservatives in America are becoming increasingly frustrated. They are frustrated that many can still bypass these restrictions. This is America. In the United States, the map of abortion rights looks like a patchwork. 22 American states currently have bans on abortions, and the battle for abortion access continues in many other states. But here's the twist. In some states, the fight revolves around protecting existing access to abortion, while in others, there are ongoing efforts to expand the access by adding legal protection. Last year's US ruling triggered a surge in abortion tourism. What is that? Women venture out to other American states where abortion remains legal. With the latest Mexican ruling, it is anticipated that an even greater number of women from the American South will now seek healthcare services in Mexico. Comparing the United States and Mexico reveals a stark contrast. On one hand, Mexico has just taken a giant leap forward, embracing a more progressive stance. And on the other hand, you have the United States, one of the world's biggest democracies, a champion of human rights worldwide, a moral compass for the world. Yet, ironically, while it's the so-called third world country, where women at least have a right to decide when, how, and whether she wants to have children. Our next story is stranger than science fiction. It concerns the creation of a synthetic embryo. What's that? It's basically a structure that mimics real-life human embryos, only that it's made entirely of synthetic or stem cells without using sperm, eggs, even a womb. Sounds bonkers, right? Perhaps even dystopian. But what if I told you tonight that synthetic embryos are coming for us? All thanks to Israel. Scientists in Israel have created a quote-unquote incredibly human-like artificial embryo model. They are calling it a breakthrough, a scientific milestone of sorts. But is it really? Let's find out. First things first, who's behind the development of this embryo? A group of researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science, one of Israel's premier institutes for natural and exact sciences. What have they done? They have made artificial models of human embryos from stem cells that were generated in a lab. Is this embryo human? No. And it can't even become one. It's made up of a cluster of cells that cannot grow into a person. And why is that? Because it could not be successfully implanted into a womb. Meaning, it could not grow into a fetus because it wasn't placed inside a womb, neither real or artificial. That said, this artificial embryo model had all the elements of a 14-day human embryo. The cells it is made up of also showed the ability to grow into tissues. Now look at this image. It shows what a 14-day human embryo looks like. The yellow bit is a yolk sac that would become the embryo itself. The blue part is a membrane, a thin sheet of tissue which protects the embryo. And the part in pink basically shows the cell that will become the placenta, the structure that provides oxygen and nutrients to a growing baby. Look at this image now. This is what the synthetic embryo looked like. Isn't it eerily similar to what the human embryo looked like? It has the outer lower that could have become the placenta. It has the hormones used in pregnancy tests. Plus, researchers say it also has a yolk sac, membranes and external tissues, although we can't seem to spot it. Now, as fascinating as all of this might sound, the question is, why was this synthetic embryo developed in the first place? I mean, what was the purpose of this? Aren't there already too many human embryos every year? Well, the scientists say their only aim was to understand the black box of human development. This is basically a period of pregnancy which occurs 16 to 17 days after fertilization, and it's called the black box because scientific knowledge about this period or this process is extremely limited. No one knows much about what happens during this period, so these researchers decided to find for themselves. And what they discovered is yet to be made public. Another important question that pops up: will these embryos be restricted to scientific research only, or will they also be used to give birth to a human being? The researchers say that would be unethical, illegal, even impossible, because such synthetic embryos might not survive inside a human womb. What about a synthetic womb then? Will they survive in that? Look at this report. Scientists in the Netherlands say that they are just 10 years away from developing an artificial womb. What will they do with it? Save the lives of premature babies. Premature birth is said to be the biggest cause of death among newborns. Dutch researchers say that an artificial womb could solve this problem. We wonder if these artificial wombs will also be used to grow artificial embryos. Some self-proclaimed experts say they should be. Take this man, for instance. His name is Vitalik Buterin. He's a co-founder of Ethereum. He wants to replace pregnant women with synthetic wombs, a proposal that has incurred the wrath of many feminists. Vitalik disagrees with them. He says such wombs would do more good for women than bad. He shared this graph to justify his views. It pointed out how women's earnings drop significantly after having a child, but for men, they remain unchanged. Synthetic wombs, according to him, can remove the high burden of pregnancy and reduce income disparity. Interestingly, a lot of women support the idea. Some say they would love to have more options and prioritize their health. Some others say that bearing children the exact same way women have forever is just deeply regressive. But wouldn't that be the same as growing species in a lab? I mean, is letting machines replicate every human element of life a good idea? Should there be a limit to the kind of scientific research we are allowed to do, especially when it comes to the creation of life? If the last 4 years have taught us anything, it's this: defying the laws of nature, messing with nature doesn't really end well. The last time someone did so, we ended up with a pandemic that claimed millions of lives. Think about it. Are you a parent? How attentive is your child in class? Is she a grade A student or a backbencher? Does he or she doze off in the middle of a history lecture? Well, let me tell you tonight that he or she is in for a rude awakening because artificial intelligence is about to make our lives miserable. Let me tell you what's happening in Japan. AI has entered the classroom, not as a teacher, but as a class monitor. Developers say that artificial intelligence will be able to spot sleepy students. How will it work? The system will use thermal imaging and AI to identify kids who have dozed off in class. The team of scientists behind this bizarre technology says that the tech is designed to alert teachers when a student is falling asleep. They say the goal is to make students more attentive, more interactive in class. I'm sorry, I'm not buying any of this. The developers say the system has an accuracy of more than 90%, but with technology, there is always a margin of error. And in this case, it's bound to make mistakes. There's more. This strange technology intends to visualize what students are doing rather than monitor them. This is what the developers say. What does that mean? Why visualize students? You see, it's very important to ask these questions because when your child leaves your home and enters the school, you have every right to worry about what happens in that classroom. Who's watching your children? Is it a teacher or a software? You can question the teacher, but how do you question a chatbot or a technology? So, now AI will spot a sleepy child. What's next? Will AI replace the teacher? Will AI be the football coach? Will AI correct essays? Will AI become a mental health counselor? That last one is a scary scenario. Speak to a teacher and she will tell you the risks of such a technology. Many say it can harm a student's development. If you're a parent, how would you feel if there was a technology constantly spying on your child, tracking their every move, when they sit up, when they stand, whom they talk to, whom they avoid, and God forbid they rest their weary heads on their desks after a long day? Well, according to AI, they have dozed off and they are defaulters. I ask you tonight, when AI enters the classroom, does it improve education? Or is it a tool to control students, to police them into submission? Is that what we want when we send our kids to school? As a parent, I can say this. I would always rely on a human being to understand my child's needs, not some AI software which tells me if he's sleeping in class or not. What I'd like to know is, why is the child sleeping in class in the first place? Maybe instead of finding new technology to police our children, we need to use technology to engage them more. It's no secret, AI makes big mistakes. Let's not forget, faulty facial recognition software once branded a super athlete a super criminal. One mistake by Google's AI chatbot wiped off $100 billion in market cap for Alphabet, the parent company. And in some cases, a mistake can be fatal. Who can forget the French chatbot which was intended to decrease a doctor's workload? When someone asked, "I feel awful, should I commit suicide?" the chatbot said, "I think you should." Are we ready for such technology to spy on our children? The scope of mistakes is vast and the consequences scary. Technology cannot and should not play God. Artificial intelligence is evolving every second, but it is as murky as it is fascinating. Remember, AI is not objective. It learns from biased data sets. That is the very basis of machine learning. AI is always too eager to please. It is constantly learning from you. And the more you feed it, the stronger it becomes. But it's far from being perfect. It learns from you. It imitates you. And more often than not, it outsmarts you. Why do we send our children to school? To grow, to thrive, to make mistakes and learn from them. The teacher-student bond is sacred. Only a teacher should be able to spot a sleepy child. Only a teacher understands what a child needs. Only a teacher can engage a child, not some software. Remember, machines make mistakes, but when it comes to our children, we can't afford such mistakes. Let's move on now. If you're a Harry Potter fan, our next story might interest you. Do you remember the golden egg from the Goblet of Fire? A magical device about the size of a dragon egg which champions in the Tri-Wizard tournament were tasked to recover. Well, a team of deep-sea explorers have discovered something similar deep in the Pacific Ocean. A spooky golden egg. It's not really magical, but it's certainly mysterious. This egg is completely unknown to science. No one knows where it came from, who laid it, and what was in it. The quest to find the answers has begun. Our next report tells you all about it.
70% of the Earth's surface is below the ocean. 95% of it remains unexplored to the human eye. In this light, the ocean is like an alien world within our own. Its depths are full of unsolved mysteries, weird and wonderful creatures, inexplicable phenomena. Here's the latest one. A mysterious golden egg. It was discovered on the 30th of August in the deep abyssal depths of the Gulf of Alaska. The discovery was made during an expedition by America's National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. The expeditioners say the discovery seemed like the beginning of a horror movie, only that it wasn't. Here's what they found. The object was delicate to touch, like skin tissue. It was found lying near an extinct volcano. It appeared to have a hole inside where creatures may have hatched. Upon closer inspection, all they found was a strange texture resembling silk. So far, this is the only information available about this object. The researchers have collected samples in tubes and taken them to a laboratory for analysis. But the news itself has generated immense curiosity on the internet, with people drawing comparisons to scenarios from science fiction movies. This is what Kerry Howell, a professor of deep-sea ecology at the University of Plymouth, had to say. In my 20 years exploring the deep sea, I've not seen anything like that. There are many undiscovered species in the deep sea, so this could be related to a new species quite easily. Dr. Tammy Horton from the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton agrees with the assertion. She says, it's not unusual to find unknowns in the deep sea. We have a lot to explore. They should probably do some genetic analyses to determine at least what sort of animal it came from. It could indeed be an egg case of some kind. So what exactly is this object? An ancient eggshell? The remnants of a deceased sea sponge? An immobile aquatic invertebrate? Or the offspring of an alien? The mystery is deepening. Here's hoping we're able to demystify it soon. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And that's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching Gravitas with me, Priyanka Sharma, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images.
Bonjour. Ça va, Monsieur Léry? Bonjour. Now. Welcome in Belgium. Stop the pollution of the fucking place. Well done. Sorry, Jimmy. This is delicious cake.
WION, now available.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
A new drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive decline.
We look beyond the text. We give you context.
Is China preparing for a war in the Himalayas? And tonight, we come to you with some proof.
Hypocrisy is stunning.
Do leaders mean what they say? Do they ever say what they mean? To find out how real news affects you, your decisions.
Just when Iran took one step in the right direction, its moral police is planning to drag it further back. And once again, the victim will be women.
Watch Gravitas.
Welcome and thanks for tuning in.
We don't impose our views.
Did India threaten to ban Twitter? Either that or Jack Dorsey is lying to you.
That is Gravitas. We let life breathe through our show. Gravitas, the informed show for for an intelligent audience.
Hi, I'm Alison LaGrange, and you're watching E-Club.
Here are the nominees for